Hello, everyone. It's just another day in the life as a military wife. And with the year wrapping up, we are at the very end and about to start a new year. It's that time again, people. We're going to be covering my year in books. So buckle up to find out what I read this year and what I thought about it. As always, I'm your host, Sam Wolf, and you're listening to Life of a Military Wife. Okay, so let's dig on in. For those of you who've been listening to my channel for a while, you'll be aware that a couple years ago, I tried out the 5x5 reading challenge. And the reason why I wanted to do this is because I found I'd gotten into a reading rut. I was reading very similar things over and over again. I wanted to broaden my horizons. I wanted to read more. I didn't feel like I was reading as much as I had in other parts of my life. I've got 4 little humans I'm trying to keep alive. So I was, now trying to get back into reading and explore and find some new great books. The 5x5 reading challenge is by Shoal Sisters. And what it is you pick 5 different categories, and then you pick 5 books for each category so that by the end of the year, you've read at least 25 books. And I loved that idea because it gave me the ability to kind of branch out. Now, these categories can be anything. It doesn't have to be a fiction or history or mystery or any of that stuff. It can be different things like self-improvement or read aloud with the kids or reread books that I love. It can be anything. And each year I have done different categories. So this year I had ones for the podcast that I was reviewing. I had the read alouds with the kids. I have my rereads that I read every year that I love and I go back to all the time. And then I had ones that I was trying to catch up on or explore. I try to preview books that my kids are reading before they read them. However, I have 4 children and 2 are voracious readers, and it's not always possible, so I do my best. But that is why I started this. And then once I started that challenge, I thought it would be fun to come at the end of the year and tell you how it went. And the first year, I set the challenge of reading 25 books, and I think I ended up reading like almost 40 books. And then last year, again, I had my list of 25 books, and I ended up reading 52 books. This year, I, again, started with my normal 25, and I may have just, read 77 books this year. Now, I was really excited about this, and I was talking to another friend of mine who's a massive reader, and she's like, oh yeah, I'm doing the 100-book challenge. I'm like, what? There's a 100-book challenge? Needless to say, she completed that one this year, so I have a new goal. But, that's just me. So as I'm going through this list, I'm just going to go through the list as it is. And I always tell you that I'm not going to make comments as I'm reading off the names of what I read. And then I usually make a comment anyway. So I'll probably do that anyway, even though I say I'm not going to. Buckle up. It is what it is. But then I will point out what my favorite ones were. And if you've listened to some of my lists in the past, you'll probably be able to recognize my rereads because they're always on this list. So let's just jump into my list. So we started off, not the year, but on this list, it starts off with Brandon Sanderson. And I'm going to tell y'all, I try not to be a Brandon Sanderson fangirl, but I'm a total Brandon Sanderson fangirl. The Cosmere is totally my jam. I love it. But I'm still a Star Wars nerd, and this year you will see I hit into the Star Wars hardcore, and it's partly because I started talking to some other OG Star Wars nerds, and they pointed me in the direction of some really awesome expanded universe books I had not previously read. And then I reread a bunch too that I'd read when I was a teenager. So, all right, now that I've said I was going to start my list and I didn't start my list, I will go back to starting my list. So we read the entire Alcatraz series as an out loud read with me and my kids. And that's Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, Alcatraz versus the Scrivener's Bones, Alcatraz versus the Knights of Crystalia, Alcatraz versus the Shattered Lens, Alcatraz versus the Dark Talent, and the last book, Bastille versus the Evil Librarians. Really, really fun read for a whole family. It sounds really oddly named, but they're great. They're not Cosmere, but they're really great family read-aloud material. The next one was Murtagh. I was previewing that one for my daughter. She loves it. I wasn't so into it. Okay, so the next book I have is Jungle Book. The Jungle Book was also a read-aloud. Then I got into some ones that my husband reminded me of David Weber's, which is Off Armageddon Reef, By Schism Rent Asunder, Heresy's Distressed, A Mighty Fortress, How Firm a Foundation, Like a Mighty Army, Hell's Foundation Quiver, At the Sign of Triumph, Through Fiery Trials, and then I skipped into some other stuff, but those are all David Weber, and they're the Safehold series. And basically, at some point or another, I've read almost all of them, reread almost all of them this year. I am not a huge fan of some of the latter books with the gruesome war part. I really like the social intrigues and the political maneuverings in the books. There are some definite characters I adore. He's a really great writer and he makes very, very well-rounded characters, and his world building is super fun. So it might be one that you want to look into. All right. The next one is Man of the Family. Oh, and Father and I Were Ranchers. Those are the Little Britches series that had been recommended to me by my mom before she passed away. And my dad was reading them, and I decided it might be worth checking out and do a read aloud as a kid with the kids. Oh my goodness, my little 8-year-old boy was giggling like no other. All of my kids love the books. They're really, really good. They're actually based on the real life experiences of a young man who was a young boy in outskirts of Denver around the turn of the last century, so like early 1900s. And it's really entertaining and super fun. And there are some sad parts because it's based on his real life, and everyone's life has hardship. But they're a really great read. We've only gotten into those 2 books. There are more books in the series, but we haven't tackled those yet. We jumped around a lot with our read alouds this year as a family. Okay, the next is my Star Wars. I got into, more of my Star Wars and Brandon Sanderson. So Rogue Squadron, Wedge's Gamble, Krytos Trap, Bacta War. Those are all the X-Wing series, and I've got more of those later on because I thought I did. Okay, maybe I forgot to put the rest on the list. Ooh, maybe I have read more than 77 books this year. Okay, I'm getting distracted again. All right. Alloy of Law, Shadow of Self, Bands of Mourning, and Lost Metal. Those are the second era of the Mistborn series of Brandon Sanderson Cosmere. Seven at Sea. That's a reread. I always reread that one. I love that one by the Hortons. It's about their life as a family of 7 living for a year in the Bahamas on a boat. It's fabulous. The Awakened Brain. Oh my goodness. I did an episode on this one because I loved it so much. This is amazing. Everyone should read it. I feel like I should just buy copies for everyone. Parenting a House United. Again, did an episode on this one. I really love Nicolene Nicolene Peck, and I love what she's doing for parenting and just teaching parents and helping give them resources. She has a YouTube channel. I will link it again. I love that woman. Atomic Habits. This one is fabulous, especially if you're trying to get started on goal setting. Did that one. Soul of Civility. Covered this one as an episode, so y'all know. You can go through my whole review on those ones. Mary Poppins. We did a Mary Poppins read aloud with the kiddos. So we did the original Mary Poppins comes back, and Mary Poppins opens the door. Oh yeah. So here's where some of my more Star Wars runs in. The Truce at Bakura, and then 12 Rules for Life. That's Jordan Peterson. That was another book for the podcast. So I did a review for all of you guys. That one was a good one. A little heavier than some of the other ones. The Lost Man by Jane Harper. That one was for a book club that I am in. If you like whodunit mysteries that are kind of creepy, this is for you. I'm not a huge suspenseful, creepy book person anymore. So it was a stretch for me. It's an interesting read. It's a well-constructed book, but if you're planning on reading it, I would read it before you ever let a teenager read it. I would not have kids read it. It is definitely made for older audiences, and it tackles some really intense life experiences. So that's kind of where I'm at with that one. It wasn't a bad book. It's just not always my cup of tea, that sort of stuff. Okay, the next is Little Lord Fauntleroy and Little Women. Those were also read-alouds. The next one was The Mysterious Benedict Society. I was pre-reading that one for my kids. It is a really good kids book. I actually found it rather engaging as an adult myself. Solo Command, another Star Wars one. Then I found a whole new fantasy series for my daughter. She loves fantasy, my oldest daughter, and my oldest son is more sci-fi, but they both read both. Anyway, she's the one who's into Aragon and all those books. So it is Ruins of Gorion, Ruins of Gorion is the first book in that one, and there'll be more from that. Wraith Squadron, it goes back to the Star Wars X-Wing series. Because I don't always read series in order. I'll explain that later. Next is Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. That was a read aloud. Courtship of Princess Leia. Again, another one of my Star Wars ones. The Green Ember. That was another pre-read for my kids. I haven't been able to convince them to read it yet, so maybe they will, maybe they won't. I'll get back to you on that one. I thought it was cute. It's fantasy with animals. The lead characters are bunnies. It's really a very cute book. Okay, back to the Ranger's Apprentice series, which is The Ruins of Gorion. Well, the second book is The Burning Bridge, then it's The Icebound Land, then The Battle for Scandia, then The Sorcerer of the North, next The Siege of Micdaw, and then the last one that I read was Eric's Ransom. So I really only intended to read the first couple of books to just get a feel for it. Usually by that point, you get a clue on what age range the author was shooting towards and the appropriate developmental level for that book series. Even though these are really super fun, easy, light reads, I just could not get enough. I just wanted to know how it ended. And I still have not finished it. I just started blitzing through it, and I even bought myself a copy. Again, they're written at a middle grade level, so it's not a hard read, but it's a really fun story. So Ranger's Apprentice series, I would totally recommend. Next is Jane Eyre. All y'all know that is one of my rereads. And I read that every year. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, and Harry Potter and the Sorcerer of Stone. So we do a lot of Harry Potter rereads with my kids. My kids love Harry Potter. A Casualty of the Heart. That one is a Regency era. I got into a Regency thing, people. I did. And also I got back into my old series by Tracy Hunter Abramson, and I caught myself up. So the next set are from her. They're from her, oh, I forget what the series is called, but basically it's a whole bunch of CIA agents. Sanctuary, On the Run, Not Yet Dead Yet, In Harm's Way, and Unseen. Those are all from Tracy Hunter Abramson. Next was Darth Plagueis. That's a Star Wars one. Heir to the Empire, Star Wars one. So True a Love is another Regency one. Dark Force Rising, again, back to my Star Wars, y'all. I just had a Star Wars year. I really did. The Last Command is Star Wars. Shadows of the Empire, again, Star Wars. Then A Secret Garden was another one of my read-alouds with the kids. God Smuggler, reread, always on my list, people. I will always read that one. I give that away. I have bought so many copies of that book. The next is Star Wars Allegiance by Timothy Zahn. Survivor, another Star Wars Timothy Zahn book. And then we've got Issues by Dr. Phil. That's his newest book that has come out, and I'm going to be doing a review for it, but you're going to have to wait till a little more in January for that one. Survivor's Quest, that's another Star Wars one. Outbound is another Star Wars one. Treasure Island was another read aloud with my kiddos, and The Penderwicks is a preview for my kids. I've just heard really good things about it, so I thought I would read it ahead of time. Anyway, so that is my 77 books for the year. Now, for any of you who've been here before, you do know I've got my ones that I read all the time. Jane Eyre, God Smuggler, let me see if I can find the other ones. A Seven at Sea is another one I read all the time. And okay, this is going to be surprising. I did not read. Oh my goodness. Have I gone an entire year without reading any Jane Austen? I am absolutely appalled with myself. You know, I probably did at some point and I just didn't write it down. I always read Jane Austen pretty much every year. My favorite Jane Austen book is Persuasion. It's always one of my go-tos. So one of my friends was asking me, how do I manage to read so many books in a year? And if you listen to what I said at the beginning, it didn't start off as a lot. My goal was 25 books. I got a little higher than that. And each year I've added more books. I've gotten better. Part of that is because I'm doing read-alouds with my kids. Some of these books that we're doing as read-alouds are not very long books, so they're pretty easy, and that helps me tackle some more books. The other is I will be often reading sometimes books for the podcast that are really like in lots of information. They're information like overload. And so it's good to have something that's light and just fun to do. And so that's why I go back to some of my rereads for my lighthearted reads. Those are to just kind of break it up and help my brain process things so that I'm not mentally burned out by the fire hose of information that I'm ingesting for the podcast. And then, like I said, I found some really great middle grade books for my kids that I got into myself. So that's always a fun thing. And I really am just enjoying getting back into the Star Wars original expanded universe books and exploring all of those novels that I used to love as a kid. Star Wars and Nancy Drew and the Boxcar Children are really what made me a reader. And I have, because of that, a bunch of the Boxcar Children. We have almost every Nancy Drew book that was ever written. And I have quite an extensive Star Wars expanded universe collection as well, just because those books mean so much to me. But whatever it is that you love about books, whatever makes you excited, it's always good to mix things up. I didn't reread it this year. The Mysterious Case of Rudolph Diesel was one that I found last year that I've really enjoyed. And my kids, I didn't expect that for them to like it as much as I was loving it. And I didn't expect to like it either. I actually picked it up for my husband because I thought it sounded like a book he would like. But I wanted to listen and read it first so that I could try to convince him to read it. And I was totally hooked on it because it is a historical book. It's nonfiction, but it's written in a story format. It's written like you would read a novel. And so it's really engaging. At the same time, it's very factual and it's just got really, really awesome, really well written. Anyway, my kids asked me recently, they're like, "Hey, Mom, can we listen to that again?" Because we'll listen to audiobooks sometimes in the car as well. And I had been listening to it and I didn't want to stop listening to it. So then they started listening to it with me. So you never know what you're going to love. You never know. So it's always good to try new things. It's good to branch out. And sometimes you'll find a gem that you may not have picked up normally. So those are my recommendations. Maybe one of your goals for this next year is going to be in 2025, I'm going to read more books. I would recommend checking out the 5x5 challenge by the Schul sisters. I will link that website in the description below so you can find it. I have found it to be a really helpful way to encourage me to broaden my reading horizons and look for new things. But at the same time, I love that it encourages me to just embrace my rereads. It's okay to have a favorite book that you read every single year. That is perfectly acceptable, everyone. So that is my year in books. I'm really excited to share that with all of you. I actually have had the chance to teach 2 workshops this year about the importance of reading aloud and literacy and just books in our lives in general. And it's a lot of what I've put together with my presentation was inspired by the Read Aloud family that I covered that book last year in the podcast. A friend of mine had recommended it for me. So I would go and get the Read Aloud Family by Sarah Mackenzie. It is fabulous. And I learned so much from that book. Some of it I already knew, but it's just, I love all of the little tips and tricks and book lists. Oh my goodness, I love a good book list. And she's got a lot in that one. Didn't reread that again this year, but because of her inspiration, I ended up teaching several seminars on books. So we'll see what next year has in store for me book-wise. Again, I will always do the 5x5 challenge. However, it might be the 5x10 challenge. And, or maybe it'll be the 10x10 challenge. We'll see. We'll see if I can get to 100 books next year. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'm quite there yet. Maybe I'll just get to 85 or 90. So with all of that said, please let's be the good we want to see in the world. And maybe that is sharing your favorite book with a new friend. As always, I am your host, Sam Wolf, and you've been listening to Life of a Military Wife.